This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. President Trump extended the ceasefire with Iran. There were a day. We had till Wednesday night, and the deadline was about to expire. He did it without Iran agreeing to negotiate. He acted unilaterally. Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. Trump said the extension will last until Iran's leader can present a quote-unquote unified proposal for peace. I think they've pretty much been unified in telling you what exactly you need to do for peace. He claimed the Iranian government is seriously fractured because of all the bombing. He says we've decapitated the entire leadership, so there's nobody left to negotiate. Now, the extension, nobody left to negotiate with. The extension was granted not at the request of the Iranians. They're not talking to Trump. It was a specific request from Pakistan's Prime Minister Shabbaz Sharif, as well as the Field Marshal for Pakistan, Osman Munir. They're the interlocutors, they're the negotiators, the mediators who are trying to jumpstart the peace talks in Islamabad. Iran, no message. So Pakistan got on the phone and said, please extend the ceasefire. The military will continue its naval blockade against Iran, which means Hormuz is still closed. The White House doesn't know what one hand is doing. The one hand is doing something, the other hand, Trump, it's total chaos. First of all, nobody knew when the ceasefire was going to expire. I thought it was tonight. Now, 4 different versions of when the ceasefire was going to end, according to Donald Trump. He gave us 4 different times, but he finally settled on tomorrow at about 8 p.m., and now he's extended the ceasefire. Mahdi Mohammadi is the advisor to Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is the Iranian Speaker of the Parliament. He was the lead negotiator for the Iranians 2 weeks ago when they were negotiating in Islamabad. His spokesman is Mahdi Mohammadi, and he dismissed Trump's ceasefire extension, saying, quote, the losing side cannot set the terms. Again, Iran refused to attend these peace talks in Pakistan. Trump kept saying, they're on. They said, no, we're not talking to Trump. It's a waste of our time. He will not do what we say. The war continues. The blockade of Hormuz continues. And Trump is going to claim, in an attempt to save Orange Face, that we've decapitated the leadership and nobody's in charge. That's why we don't have anybody to negotiate with. That's what he's claiming now. So that's why I've extended the ceasefire. The fact is, it's a highly unified leadership. The supreme leader is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, but it's not a cult of personality. It's bottom up, meaning you can keep decapitating this decentralized bureaucracy, and there are always people to replace whoever you kill. It's a serious problem. And there will be no opening of Hormuz until Israel pulls out of southern Lebanon. Ain't happening. Israel and Hezbollah are now accusing each other of violating their 10-day ceasefire agreement. Actually, it was a ceasefire agreement with the government of Lebanon. Hezbollah, the paramilitary organization within Lebanon, never really agreed to it. They said they would obey it. Hormuz stays closed. So there is no peace. There's no peace. Trump chickened out because he cannot get the Gulf of Hormuz open until he gives Iran everything he wants, and that includes talking Benjamin Netanyahu into pulling out of southern Lebanon. That's not happening anytime soon. Trump is a cornered rat. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York. Thank you for finding me. We are live Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. And there are clips, highlights of this show 7 nights a week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I am sticking to the schedule. So, as I said, Trump extended the ceasefire because it's Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. The ceasefire was supposed to expire tomorrow night. Iran wouldn't negotiate with him. So Trump had to make this deal with Pakistan. Pakistan, which was supposedly was supposed to be holding the talks in Islamabad, Pakistan said, will you extend the ceasefire? And he agreed. That's Donald Trump, right? He keeps the world guessing. Will he sign a deal or will he not? Or will he resume airstrikes? Do we have war or peace? See, Trump, up until an hour ago, was claiming our military is raring to go, ready to commit more war crimes. But our Pentagon, especially the lawyers inside the Pentagon and the American people, are listening to Iran more than they're listening to Trump. And Iran says Hormuz stays closed unless Trump stops with this nonsense and Israel pulls out of southern Lebanon. Well, Trump plays it like, oh, I love keeping everybody guessing. He has no idea what to do. With only hours remaining, he didn't have a clue. And he just threw up his hands and said, I'm extending the ceasefire. So he's claiming, I'm doing this because the Iranians can't get their act together. Really? Because Hormuz is still closed. He says, I can't negotiate with the Iranians. They don't have leadership, seriously fractured. So I got to give them time to get their act together before we can resume the war. And again, Iran is not seriously fractured. They've been very consistent in what they want. But to save face, late Tuesday night, Trump is claiming, I don't have anybody to negotiate with because I did such a great job decapitating the Iranian leadership. Okay, so tell that to the 20,000 ships waiting in the Persian Gulf to get permission to sail through the Strait of Hormuz. If you've done such a great job breaking the Iranian leadership, tell all those tankers it's safe to sail through Hormuz. And tell Lloyd's of London it's safe to insure all those tankers. Hormuz is still shut. And he's continuing the blockade. The world is on the brink as the United States, you and me, cannot summon the gumption to remove this cretin in the Oval Office. The global economy is losing billions as the Strait of Hormuz is closed to traffic. Europe and Asia are about to run out of jet fuel. Farmers around the world unable to afford fertilizer. An estimated 45 million people in the sub-Saharan and Asia are about to plunge into famine by June. And for the first time since the 1970s, the global economy is struggling with inflation and recession. That would be stagflation, leaving the world's central banks powerless, not knowing whether to raise interest rates to fight inflation or lower interest rates to fight unemployment, while corporate America races frantically to replace all of us with artificial intelligence. There were 24 hours on the clock. That's when the ceasefire between the United States and Iran was scheduled to end. Iran refused to talk. They won. They won. Hormuz is still closed, and Trump crumbled. One man is responsible for all this pain and suffering, not just in Iran or the Persian Gulf, around the world. One man is responsible for all of it, Donald Trump. who got conned into this by two religious fanatics, Benjamin Netanyahu, and white Christian nationalist, alcoholic bigot, and, according to his mother, serial abuser of women, Pete Hegseth. He got talked into it by those two. Donald Trump holds the keys to our military, making him singularly responsible for the biggest military blunder in American history, the biggest economic blunder in American history, and he doesn't know what to do. And the problem is he doesn't know that he doesn't know what to do because he's insane. The rest of us are beginning to feel the pinch. We're starting to worry, even the people who voted for this homunculus. Tucker Carlson just apologized for endorsing Donald Trump. A lot of people in this country are worried this idiot will get talked into sending ground troops in to free up Hormuz. So while Trump tries to project calm, underneath that rancid exterior is a terrified, orange, syphilitic, mold-starving brain, desperate for something to chew on, but there's nothing left inside the brain to eat. On Tuesday, Trump said he's feeling no pressure whatsoever. That's what he said before calling off the ceasefire. He said, if there's a peace deal, there's a peace deal. If there isn't, there isn't. But there's going to be one, and it's going to happen very quickly, and I'm not in the mood to extend the ceasefire. Oh, by the way, I'm extending the ceasefire. Delusional. He's delusional. Trump is delusional. He deluded himself into thinking he's the world's greatest salesman. But this isn't a rat-infested condo on the Upper West Side. Trump has spent his professional life promising New York City investors that they're reading the wrong inspector's report, and what they're smelling and seeing with their own eyes and nose is completely wrong, and this isn't a basement hovel, this is a penthouse. That's how he made his name. And quite frankly, he was never any good at that. He was never a great salesman. Everyone knew he was a pathological liar, which is why he had to declare bankruptcy 6 times, at least 6 times. And eventually had to turn first to the American mafia and then the Russian mafia for both muscle and a small skim off the money he laundered for them. He was willing to show profits where there clearly was none. That's before he hosted The Apprentice on NBC. He was making his money doing what he does best, losing money, but claiming profits for the Russian mafia and the American mafia. That's how you launder money. Trump, before announcing the ceasefire on Tuesday, said, "We're winning," which is disconcerting because in the same breath, he also says we won. Well, we either are winning or we won. And he said the purpose of those non-existent talks in Islamabad was merely to work out the terms of Iran's surrender. But today, Trump said, my naval strategy is pure genius because once I realized the Iranians were closing the Strait of Hormuz and there was nothing I could do about it, I decided to close the Strait of Hormuz. He said, by blockading all the ships trying to leave the Strait of Hormuz, I'm keeping Iranian oil from reaching the international market, and that means Iran is losing $500 million a day. Right. First of all, it's $200 million a day, and you lifted economic sanctions on Iranian oil, so it could be sold, so it wouldn't cost $7 a gallon to fill up in the state of Washington. He said Iran, this is what he said Tuesday, Iran is losing $500 million a day, and that's an unsustainable number. You know what's an unsustainable number? $2 billion a day. That's what the bombing campaign cost the United States taxpayer. And That's before we send in ground troops. On Tuesday, before he caved, Donald Trump said there's no need to talk about extending that ceasefire because Iran, which said it's not showing up to the peace talks, Iran is begging me to make a deal, and the talks are just a formality, but anyone who criticizes the war lacks patriotism and they're hurting our troops and they're traitors. He called Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries a traitor because he's pushing for a vote on a war powers resolution. And Trump said that is damaging our negotiations with the Iranians at a very critical moment. He said these are critical negotiations. That's what Trump said. He's negotiating critically with Iran, even though he won and they're just trying to figure out a way to surrender. Trump said criticizing the war hurts Trump's team, his peace delegation, because people like the treasonous traitor Hakeem Jeffries is giving the Iranians hope that I, Donald Trump, won't be able to finish a war that's not a war, but if it were a war, we already won it, but Democrats want us to lose the war, which is not a war because we already won it, but it's not a war. And they're giving Iranians false hope that they can get a better deal out of me, even though there are no negotiations, because Iran has agreed to everything, even though Iran says it may or may not ever show up for any peace talks, which Trump says are really just the Iranians signing the terms of surrender to a war that is not a war. So don't criticize the war that is not a war because it jeopardizes our troops, who I may or may not send in to Hormuz. Asked if he had any regrets about starting this war that is not a war, Trump told reporters, I had no choice. He said, we had no choice. We had no choice? All of a sudden, the malignant narcissist who calls them his soldiers, calls it his bombs, his bombing campaign, my Pentagon, all of a sudden, we had no choice? The entire planet told you not to do this. Even the bloodthirsty feral neocons in Washington said, don't do it. But Trump said, we had no choice. We being you, Donald Trump, and two crazed religious sociopaths, Benjamin Netanyahu and Pete Hegseth. The three of you decided you knew better than the rest of the entire planet. We had no choice. See, we had a deal with the Iranians back in 2015. Remember, Obama made that deal? But can't be any good, Obama's black. So Trump and the morons on Fox News said that deal with Iran was insane. They said, we're giving Iran $150 billion not to build a nuclear bomb. No, not even close. We did unfreeze some of their assets overseas. We were letting Iran get hold of its own money, which we had frozen. So Obama said, how about your people don't starve and can have some medicine, and you agree not to build nuclear weapons, which you had agreed to back in 2003. So Donald Trump says Obama's deal was the worst deal in the history of deal making. Well, in order for Iran now to agree to open the Strait of Hormuz, they're not only demanding America unfreezes Iranian assets, they're also demanding $270 billion in reparations to rebuild the nearly 120,000 civilian buildings, as well as the thousands of bridges, roads, and key pieces of infrastructure our 13,000 bombs destroyed. We dropped 13,000 bombs on Iran in about 5 weeks. That doesn't include what Israel did to them. And Iran is saying we'll reopen Hormuz when you give us $270 billion as reparations for your illegal war. This Obama deal signed back in 2015, looking genius. It's looking really good right now. On top of the $1.5 trillion that Donald Trump wants to give the Pentagon for fiscal year 2027, Trump says he needs Congress right now to pass a $200 billion war supplemental to pay for more bombs and logistical support to keep his war, which is not a war because we are winning a war that's not a war. And we've actually won. We're not winning. We won it, but I need $200 billion for the not a war supplemental. So when all is said and done, should we continue on this path, the war that we already won, but it's not a war, will end up costing taxpayers $1 trillion. That doesn't include the 12 dead soldiers and more than 300 wounded. That doesn't include the 3,000 dead Iranian civilians and scores of people killed by Iranian drones and missiles in the Persian Gulf and Israel. I'm just talking about what this war cost in terms of what Washington only cares about: money. Our money, which Republicans claim they don't want to spend unless it goes directly into the pockets of their friends and neighbors. But when it comes to taking care of our soldiers, forget it. Not interested. See this photograph? It was taken in September of 2024. It's sacrilege. This was when Trump was running for president. This photograph is not just sacrilege, it's against the law. It's Donald Trump posing in Section 60 of Arlington Cemetery in front of the graves of our service members who died in the final days of our illegal war in Afghanistan. Trump, in violation of the law, decided to celebrate Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, which Trump said was a disaster. He celebrated the pullout by turning Arlington Cemetery, the sacred area known as Section 60, he turned it into a political photo op, which is not just a breach of human decency, it's against the law. A female employee at Arlington tried to stop Trump from entering, and she ended up calling the police, filing a report accusing Trump's campaign staff of shoving her. But she decided not to press charges, she later said, for fear of what Trump and his supporters would do to her. So this is Donald Trump, Section 60, Arlington Cemetery, in front of the graves of our soldiers. He's smiling. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. He's standing next to the families of the loved ones who are buried there. Now you'll notice, not to be self-serving, but I did block out the tombstones because it's against the law to photograph them. So I won't show the names on the tombstones. I also blocked out the faces of the children in this picture because that's what human decency dictates. They're children. They didn't agree to this. Wait, let me block out the other child in this picture. There's another child here. There we go. Okay. This is Donald Trump. That is Donald Trump, who trashes Gold Star families. Remember when he said about John McCain, I prefer my war heroes who don't end up in a POW camp? Remember that? And everybody said, well, that's it. He can't get elected president. Well, he did. And when he got elected president, he called the wife of a soldier who had just been killed. This was during his first administration. He said to the grieving widow, quote, this is what he signed up for. He knew what he was getting himself into. What are you going to do? And she broke down in tears. That's how Donald Trump comforts a grieving war widow. He calls our soldiers suckers and losers. He has told staffers he doesn't want to be photographed with wounded veterans because he finds it depressing and it's a bad look for me. It's a bad look for me. He reportedly told the Pentagon in the past year, I never want to be photographed standing next to highly decorated female and black soldiers, especially any that have been promoted to general. On Memorial Day, May 29th, 2017, Trump appeared at Arlington National Cemetery, accompanied by General John Kelly, who was serving at the time as Director of Homeland Security. 2 months later, he became Trump's White House Chief of Staff. They were standing at the grave of General Kelly's son, a Marine who died in Afghanistan. And Trump turned to General Kelly in front of General Kelly's son and said, quote, I don't get it. What was in it for them? Unquote. 6 phony medical deferments to stay out of Vietnam, a war he supported. 2 older sons who love guns, love to hunt, love to kill endangered animals, but they never served, although they do serve on the board of a company that manufactures military drones, and they stand to make a fortune if and when that $200 billion war supplemental gets passed. He's got a draft-age son who shows no interest in fighting his father's war, but why would he? This is a photograph from last week's USA Today. It's families and friends of our soldiers on the home front putting together care packages for our troops who are serving in the Gulf right now. Our soldiers need care packages because our military, which has a budget of $1 trillion this year, next year Trump wants to bump it up to $1.5 trillion. Our soldiers don't have access right now to deodorant, soap, and the ones in the Gulf, a lot of them are starving. There isn't enough food for our soldiers. Well, the military says it's having trouble delivering those care packages due to logistical issues. But this is a photograph of the food being served to our Marines and sailors on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. There in the Persian Gulf. They're getting roughly 1 meal a day. This is from USA Today. This is a picture of the food being served. One of our soldiers sent it back home. These are one of many photographs sent by angry soldiers who say, we're starving. We're starving. This is a photograph of the meals being served on board the USS Tripoli. You know the term soldiers march on their bellies? If you can't feed your soldiers, you're not going to win. This is what we're feeding the Marines and sailors on board the USS Tripoli and the USS Abraham Lincoln. They're doing the blockade. They're boarding ships. Cold slabs of processed meat. What is that? Was this boiled cabbage? I don't know what that is. That dog food? Boiled carrots on top? That's what we're feeding our soldiers. That's what we're feeding our soldiers. USA Today asked our Christian white nationalist defense chief and serial abuser of women, at least according to his own mother, and of course, according to the woman who was paid $50,000 to keep quiet after she accused him of rape, Pete Hegseth, was asked about the shortages of food on board the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Tripoli. USA Today quotes Pete Hegseth, whose body is covered in neo-Nazi tattoos, as saying, quote, "My team confirmed the logistics stats for the Lincoln and Tripoli. Both have 30-plus days of Class 1 supplies food on board. Nav Cent monitors this every day for every ship our sailors deserve and receive the best, unquote. And Pete Hegseth wouldn't lie to us. When has he ever uttered a falsehood? I mean, other than insisting we won in Iran, calling it the greatest military achievement in American history. Other than that lie and the lie about toppling the Iranian regime, there was that lie that he keeps repeating, that they don't control Hormuz, America does. He also said we've wiped out Iran's entire Navy, Air Force. Okay, other than those lies and the lie about wiping out 90% of Iran's ballistic missiles and drones. Other than all those lies, when has he ever lied to us, except when he said we didn't blow up that elementary school, except for that lie, and the lie about we don't target civilians or civilian infrastructure, except for that lie and their narco-terrorists that were killing in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. Except all those lies, when has he ever lied to us? Well, it is Tuesday night, exactly 2 weeks ago, after multiple ultimatums, while threatening war crimes on an industrial scale, Donald Trump got the Iranians to agree to a 2-week ceasefire, and that was all they agreed to. They didn't open up Hormuz. So they got everything they wanted for 2 weeks without having to open up Hormuz. What did we get from this 2-week ceasefire other than the thrill of watching Donald Trump crumble? Trump is a cornered rat, the most dangerous variety of a cornered rat, because he's not aware he's a cornered rat. He's operating on instinct. Deep down in Donald Trump's rat brain, way, way down there, he knows he's a cornered rat. But the folds of insanity covering his rat brain don't allow reality to percolate up, won't percolate up to his consciousness. So all Trump feels is anxiety, rage, and anger. And he has to interpret that feeling. And he figures, well, I'm not a cornered rat, but I feel anxious, I'm raging, I'm angry. Oh, I know what this means. I have to lash out at others. That's how he operates. He wakes up every morning feeling like crap, doesn't understand why, and he figures, oh, it must be because I haven't lashed out at people. Donald Trump created this mess, and he has nobody to blame but everybody else. 2 weeks ago, he was threatening to destroy Iran's entire civilization. But we are getting reports that Pentagon lawyers and even some generals have had a come to Jesus moment. And I do mean Jesus. They said, sir, mein Führer, it's a war crime. We're tired of committing war crimes. And I'm afraid, mein Führer, we can't follow these orders. That's what we are hearing, that there was not a mutiny inside the Pentagon. They began obeying the law. And Hegseth and Trump looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? Iran senses absolute fear in this cornered rat, and they have mocked him openly and incessantly in the lead up to the ceasefire, during the ceasefire, and right after he crumbled and extended the ceasefire. They haven't opened up Hormuz. They are suffocating the world economy, and nobody's blaming them. They're blaming Donald Trump. Well, they did open up Hormuz for a few hours. They essentially agreed to open up Hormuz on Friday when Israel and Lebanon signed their ceasefire. And Trump has no idea that he has no idea what to do. He wants Iran to give him everything he wants, but he doesn't know what he wants. He wants to sit on an aircraft carrier in Tokyo Bay, the USS. He wants to be on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay and have the Iranians sign a surrender like MacArthur did to end World War II. So he doesn't know what to do. He says there's going to be a permanent deal, and if there isn't a permanent deal, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to bomb them. I'm going to bomb their desalination plants. He can't because the lawyers now won't let him. Had we been winning, had Hormuz opened, then we would have continued to bomb the hospitals and civilian infrastructure. But since we're losing, the lawyers and the generals are thinking, maybe we should obey the law. So he extended the ceasefire because he has no options. He's going to extend the naval blockade to save Orange Face. He's probably going to seize more Iranian ships, which the Iranians call an act of war. So what does that mean? It means we continue to lose. Iran and Donald Trump are strangling the Gulf of Hormuz while the rest of us plunge into darkness. And all he can do is promise war crimes on an industrial scale. On top of the war crimes he's already committed on an industrial scale. Threatening war crimes, according to the Geneva Conventions, is a war crime. So on Tuesday, right before chickening out, Trump took to social media and warned the Iranians, quote, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." What is this, like the 1930s? Who says Mr. Nice Guy? Mr. Nice Guy. Well, with Trump, you know he's serious when he insists the part of him that wants peace, when you have to call the part of Donald Trump that wants peace Mr. Nice Guy, you know he's pissed off at you. You can't call Mr. Nice Guy, that would be the loving side of Donald Trump, by Mr. Nice Guy's first name. If Trump is mad at you, you have to call him Mr. Nice Guy. Mr. Nice Guy's first name? Obergruppenführer Reichsmarschall Heinrich Nice Guy. That's the peace-loving side of Donald Trump. But if he's angry with you, you have to call him Mr. Nice Guy. You can't use his first name, which is Obergruppenführer Reichsmarschall Heinrich Nice Guy. Marla Maples said she knew the marriage was over when during sex she was no longer allowed to scream out the name Obergruppenführer Reichsmarschall Heinrich Nice Guy. She was only allowed to scream Mr. Nice Guy during sex with Donald, and that's when she knew the marriage was over. J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, Trump's peace envoys, were supposedly in Islamabad. That's what we were told, getting ready to negotiate with the Iranians, who kept saying, no, the war is going on. This is what the Iranians were saying. There's still a war. You're not bombing us, thank you. Hormuz isn't opening. We're not negotiating. The war is still going on. So Trump, again, is a cornered rat. He's desperate, but he has no idea what he's desperate for. I don't know what an insane cornered rat calculates. Maybe he thought the Iranians were just going to fold, the way he did tonight. Maybe he thinks the Iranians believe him when he threatens to wipe out their civilization. But I think he's holding on to hope that what works on people like his White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, will work on the people who run Iran. I think Trump figures if he talks to the Iranians the way he talks to every psychologically defective, self-hating half-person that comprises his entire White House, the Iranians will fold just like all the people who work for Donald Trump, because you cannot work for Donald Trump unless you're open to abuse. So he's figuring he can talk to the Iranian leadership the way he talks to Marco Rubio. I'll destroy you. You're worthless. You have no idea who you're dealing with. But Iran knows who they're dealing with. Someone who can't destroy them because he's worthless. Again, if you want a job in the Trump White House, you have to know deep inside you're worthless. You have to have abusive parents. You have to almost find it comforting to be threatened and screamed at. Then you can serve in the Trump White House. And he figures, because it works with all the mental midgets, I don't know if that's I'm allowed to say mental midgets. I apologize. But he figures if it works with all the idiots who work for him, it's going to work for the Iranians. It doesn't. Trump's 3 peace envoys, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared, were supposedly in Pakistan. This actually happened. Trump said, J.D. Vance, he's already arriving in Islamabad. And as Trump was saying that, J.D. Vance was photographed pulling into the White House. 20% of the world's oil choked off. Trump cannot do anything about that other than choke it off himself, which makes no sense, but that's what he's doing. He's got his own blockade of Hormuz. You don't close Hormuz, I do. On Friday, Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz just for a few hours. They did that because Israel and Lebanon agreed to a ceasefire. This is how you know. I'll explain to you why Trump cannot do anything and how he got suckered by Bibi Netanyahu, okay? So Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz on Friday because there was this ceasefire, 10-day ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. But Israel isn't fighting Lebanon, it's fighting Hezbollah. And Hezbollah said, well, we'll see. We'll see if there's a ceasefire. So Iran said, okay, we'll open up the Strait of Hormuz. But Trump knows he has no control over Bibi Netanyahu, who got him into this mess. And Netanyahu wants something completely different than what America wants. Netanyahu wants permanent war because he's facing corruption charges. As we speak, he's trying to postpone his own testimony. So Benjamin Netanyahu's interests are not those of the Israeli people's, the Middle East's, or the Americans, or Donald Trump's. Netanyahu's government of far-right religious zealots, I mean, they are as bad as Jerry Falwell, Pete Hegseth, Pastor Doug, who I've talked about. No difference. Netanyahu's government is planning to seize all the land in Lebanon south of the Litani River. That's his plan. He didn't say that in the Situation Room in mid-February when he sold this idea to Donald Trump. And you cannot separate the war in Lebanon, the Israeli war in Lebanon, from America's war in Iran, because there will be no ceasefire. There will be no real ceasefire. And by that I mean Hormuz will not open up until Israel pulls out of southern Lebanon. Take a look at this. That's the yellow line. That is what Netanyahu is calling the buffer zone. It's where, up until February 28th, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese civilians lived, but they've since been thrown out of their homes. And Netanyahu's government plans to make anything south of the yellow line Greater Israel. And they have openly said that. His finance minister has openly said this. Other people within his cabinet are saying, south of the Litani River is the yellow zone. That is going to be Greater Israel. And hundreds of thousands of Lebanese civilians lived below the Litani River. They're not allowed to come back. And if Netanyahu has his way, thousands of Israeli settlers, the kind who are populating the West Bank, you know, the West Bank, that's supposed to be the Palestinian homeland. Well, those Israeli whack jobs are planning to send Israeli lynch mobs or settlers. There are about 10 incidents a day in the West Bank of Israeli settlers either lynching or torching, killing, beating up innocent Palestinians. The plan with these Israeli whack jobs is to send settlers into southern Lebanon and settle the land, which they will then call Greater Israel, all under the phony rubric of creating a buffer zone, make it safe for northern Israel. Greater Israel, that would be southern Lebanon, the Golan Heights, which belongs to Syria, West Bank, grabbed during the Seven-Day War in 1967, and Gaza, also grabbed in 1967 from Egypt. Trump can't read a map, can't understand this, and he can't do anything about it. He can't do anything about Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel. He screwed you over. Now, you stopped talking to Bibi Netanyahu in late 2020 after he called Joe Biden to congratulate Joe Biden on winning the presidency. And you said you'll never talk to Benjamin Netanyahu again because he recognized that Biden won. And boy, did he screw you over. He cannot do anything about Benjamin Netanyahu. And the Strait of Hormuz doesn't open unless Netanyahu pulls out of southern Lebanon. The Gulf of Hormuz stays shut. Iran said, no deal unless Israel pulls out of Lebanon. So when we talk about, see, they don't talk about this in the mainstream media because it's what? Israel? Lebanon? What does that have to do with Iran? everything. It is like somebody who's been diagnosed with emphysema and just had one lung removed, and the doctor isn't saying, you need to give up cigarette smoking. It's like saying, well, you need to walk more. Yeah, what about cigarette smoking? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. The American media is not talking about the Israel-Lebanon connection to Hormuz. This is equivalent to somebody who just had one lung removed and the doctor not saying, you got to quit smoking. Trump has zero power over Netanyahu. Most people on the right, especially people like Tucker Carlson, believe that Donald Trump is Benjamin Netanyahu's puppet, which, of course, Trump is getting upset about. Now, Tucker Carlson yesterday apologized, did a whole mea culpa on his show, apologizing for his full-throated endorsement of Donald Trump in 2024. He's called Donald Trump the Antichrist, and he says the Israelis control the White House. There is this growing chorus on the right, and Trump hates this. There's been extensive reporting in the New York Times that Benjamin Netanyahu sat in the Situation Room in mid-February of this year and was only able to sell Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth on the Iranian war. Everybody else in the Situation Room thought this is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard. Radcliffe, head of the CIA, said it's farcical. Those were the words of the CIA chief. When Netanyahu said to Trump and his advisors, we're going to decapitate the Iranian regime, they will topple, and the Iranian people will rise up and they will have free and open elections, which in a way they almost do sometimes, kind of. It was like George W. Bush being talked into Iraq by the neocons. They all said, Netanyahu is lying to you. It won't work. Only Hegseth said, let's do it. And Trump. And now Trump is forced to deny that I got suckered into this war. Trump said yesterday, Bibi Netanyahu never talked me into this war with Iran. The fact that he had to say that means he's really upset, and Bibi talked him into this war, conned him into this war. Trump said, I decided to wage war on Iran because of the October 7th attacks on Israel. Well, the October 7th attacks on Israel were horrible, but Iran had nothing to do with that. Hamas did. Oh, but who funds Hamas? Qatar. Benjamin Netanyahu gives Qatar permission. Saudi Arabia. And Iran. The first thing Iran said after October 7th was, Hamas is lying. We had nothing to do with October 7th. He said, I decided to attack Iran all by myself because of, quote, my lifelong opinion that Iran must never possess a nuclear weapon. Well, they don't have a nuclear weapon. They gave up their nuclear weapons program in 2003. Your own Director of National Intelligence told you that this year and last year. So, Iran does have a stake in Lebanon, whether we like it or not. It funds and supports Hezbollah. Doesn't fund and support Hamas. Gives Hamas some money, teaches it about rockets. But Hezbollah in Lebanon is Iran's baby. And Hezbollah has hundreds of thousands of missiles pointing at Israel. Now, if you don't think of Lebanon and what is Hezbollah, try to imagine the Proud Boys having their own military. That's what Hezbollah is. And Hezbollah has hundreds of thousands of missiles pointing directly at northern Israel. So this war is about Hezbollah. It's not about Iran's non-existent nuclear enrichment, nuclear bomb enrichment program that doesn't exist. It's not about Iran funding Hamas. It's not about Iran helping the Houthis in their war against Saudi Arabia. It's about one thing and one thing only: Hezbollah in Lebanon. Okay? And that is why Benjamin Netanyahu tricked Donald Trump into fighting this war. Netanyahu is terrified of Hezbollah, and he wants to break Iran into 1,000 little pieces. He wants Iranians fighting among themselves like they do in Syria, like they did in Lebanon. If Iran is fighting among themselves, they cannot funnel weapons and money to Hezbollah, which Israel is terrified of. Israel couldn't defeat Hezbollah during its nearly 2-decade occupation of Lebanon. Israel pulled out in 2000. I think they invaded in 1981, 82, and they couldn't defeat Hezbollah. And then in 2006, they went back in for the second Lebanon war, and they had their asses handed to them by Hezbollah. It was a stalemate. And it was considered Israel didn't lose, but they didn't win, and Hezbollah didn't lose. The Israelis retreated. And Hezbollah has hundreds of thousands of missiles pointing at northern Israel, and those are Iranian missiles, and we see how good Iranian rocketry is. The Russians, at one point, were depending on Iranian technology, their drone technology. So, February 28th, while Trump was busy bombing Iran with Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Hezbollah fired missiles in solidarity with Israel, and Israel used that as an excuse to conduct a massive bombing campaign inside Lebanon. Since February 28th, a little over a month, 2,500 Lebanese civilians killed, 1.2 displaced from their homes. And that's what this war is about, what's going on, at least for the Israelis. That's what this war is about. Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, hasn't had a nuclear weapons program since 2003. The problem is Israel cannot defeat Hezbollah militarily, because you can't defeat terrorists militarily. Remember, everybody thought, oh, the exploding pagers and the decapitation of the leadership of Hezbollah. They killed Hassan Nasrallah, the co-founder of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is done. Well, Hezbollah was set up by Iran, not a cult of personality. It's decentralized, doesn't depend on one person or one central command. Impossible to defeat terrorists militarily. So that's what America bombing Iran is all about. It's kind of like Nixon going after the Ho Chi Minh Trail by illegally bombing Cambodia to cut off weapons to the North Vietnamese. Iran is supplying Hezbollah with the money and the weapons, although Hezbollah does pretty good all by themselves. But Netanyahu figures, crush Iran, you've eliminated Hezbollah's sugar daddy. Israel wants to destroy Iran, thinking Hezbollah's lifeline would be destroyed along with it, and he tricked Donald Trump into doing this. And it's not going to work. And Hormuz is going to stay shut. Hormuz is going to stay shut until everybody looks at a map and figures out where southern Lebanon is, where the Litani River is, where northern Israel is, what Hezbollah is, who's funding it, and why Netanyahu wants a greater Israel. This is why everybody says don't get involved with these, should we say, people. Don't get involved in a war. Don't ever get involved in a war, especially in the Middle East. So on Friday, after the ceasefire with Lebanon was announced, Iran said, okay, we're opening up Hormuz, and 30 ships were able to pass through. I think one or two ended up paying the $2 million toll, however. And once Hormuz opened on Friday, Trump declared, I'm blockading Hormuz because why? Because I don't like the idea of Iran or Israel having any power over me. He thought, wait, I can't use military force to open up Hormuz. And Iran will only open up Hormuz if Israel stops fighting in Israel. I can't control this situation. Wait a second, I'll close Hormuz. That's what a cornered rat does instinctively. So he's now turned around, I think about 30 ships since Friday. Our Navy has sent 30 ships away from the Strait of Hormuz. We're in the Gulf of Oman. The Gulf of Oman. You go from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz, and it dumps you out into the Gulf of Oman. So after he began blockading Hormuz, Iran announced, well, we're closing the strait. So that meant all the ships trapped inside the Persian Gulf couldn't pass through the strait to enter the Gulf of Oman, where they were going to be sent back anyway because of the United States blockade. If you're another country, why would you like America? We're blockading 20% of the world's oil and fertilizer. By Sunday, Iran and the United States succeeded in grinding all travel through Hormuz to a complete halt. Quietest day in the Strait of Hormuz since February 28th, when Trump got tricked into bombing Iran. So, I mean, this is great news if you're rooting against everyone on this planet. But you're rooting for the planet. 20% of the world's oil not being burned, that's good for the planet. Bad for everybody who lives on it, because America not only got out of the Iranian deal that Obama signed thanks to Trump, Trump also pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords. But he's inadvertently lowering carbon emissions by keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. General Wesley Clark is the former NATO commander. He was also a presidential candidate back in 2004. Over the weekend, he told CNN that shutting down Hormuz for the Iranians is more useful than a nuclear bomb. And he said, and they've gone ahead and used it. During the interview, General Clark pretty much said it would be a fool's errand to send America's military in to unclog Hormuz. General Clark warned that China has joined Russia in supplying the Iranian Revolutionary Guard with high-tech, state-of-the-art, short-range missiles. General Clark warned of something called short-range skimming missiles. They're right above the water surface, making American warships navigating tight maritime chokeholds especially vulnerable. General Clark warned of Iran's thousands of drones, their unmanned jet skis and submersibles packed with explosives, and as well as gunmen on incredibly fast speedboats, getting air support from the Revolutionary Guard perched above the straits inside perches carved into the mountains. Peace talks were supposed to resume this week. And as I said earlier, Trump lied, said, oh, they're on. And Vance is on his way to Islamabad. And as I said earlier, while Trump was saying that, Vance was photographed going into the White House. Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, apparently we were told they were on their way to Islamabad. We now know they never left the United States. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said what Iran has been saying for the past 7 days, and that is, we're not coming to the peace talks. There are no peace talks. And Trump kept saying, yes, there are. And Iran's foreign minister kept saying, no, we're not coming. We're not negotiating. We don't trust Trump. And especially since he blockaded Hormuz, that's an act of war. We're not coming to. And Trump kept saying, oh, the peace talks are on. And everybody reported it like, oh, they're going to be peace talks this week. So reportedly, Vance and Witkoff and Jared Kushner are in holding patterns, waiting to fly to Islamabad on a moment's notice. Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, was the lead negotiator in the talks the last time. He said, we're not going. He said, there's some sticking points that are non-negotiables, and I want peace, but not Donald Trump's terms for peace. Islamabad, as of this moment, remains in total lockdown. Let me just check, because all of this is happening. I mean, the ceasefire was announced like 5 minutes before this show started. So let me just double check here. Pardon me. I just want to make sure I'm up to date. I get sent a memo. Yeah, nothing's. No, okay. If there's anything I need to know. Okay. Okay. So far, nothing's changed. And as far as we know, Islamabad remains in total lockdown. 20,000 troops and security officials. They've closed shops and streets in preparation for the arrival of the peace delegations, which Iran says are never going to arrive until we resolve these sticking points. So a barrel of oil is back up. It plunged 10% on Friday after Iran said Hormuz is opening back up. And then Trump said, well, we're blockading Hormuz. And so now oil is back up. It's above $100. And nobody can pass through Hormuz. Iran is firing on ships from the Persian Gulf, trying to approach the Strait. And our Navy is intercepting tankers and turning them around. Nobody will insure any of these tankers. USS Marines, United States Marines, on board the USS Tripoli. Remember I showed you what they were eating? Somehow they were able to summon the strength. They're starving, but they seized the Iranian cargo ship called the Tuska, and they fired several rounds into the engine room. That was on Sunday when the Tuska was attempting to run the U.S. naval blockade in the Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM said the Marines on board the USS Tripoli gave the ship 6 hours, and they wouldn't turn around, so they seized the boat. That ship was under economic sanctions due to its long history of transporting Iranian oil and goods that are banned from being sold on the world market. Iran called this an act of war. And it's one of the many reasons in the lead up to the talks that they refuse to sit at the bargaining table. So there are demands that we have to give in on. To me, these are not brutal truths. I mean, we launched an illegal war on Iran. They want the United States to unfreeze $20 billion in overseas assets. Trump is loath to do that since it sounds like the deal Obama struck with the Iranians back in 2015. It's all about Donald Trump. Doesn't matter that the world is being plunged into darkness. One of the chief reasons Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner can't make a deal is that Trump keeps saying, do not agree to anything that sounds like the deal Obama made with Iran in 2015. In other words, don't agree to anything that makes sense. The problem is Obama back in 2015, this is what Trump is never going to realize, and I don't know how this plays out. I mean, we have a 25th Amendment, and he's got to be removed from office. I can't stand J.D. Vance, but he was against this. He was also against the bombing campaign in Yemen. See, this is the problem Trump has. And I don't know, leave a comment. How would you get out of this? How do you get out of this if you're Donald Trump? Obama back in 2015, unlike Donald Trump, Obama was negotiating from a position of strength. See, he didn't show his hand the way Trump did. He didn't use up more than 25% of our Tomahawk missiles bombing Iran. When Obama was negotiating with Iran, Iran didn't know what would happen if the United States did a bombing campaign, or what would happen if they closed Hormuz. They didn't know what would happen if we closed Hormuz. They didn't know how the world would react. Now they found out. Obama negotiated from a position of strength. Trump he loves talking about who holds all the cards. Trump, because he's a schmuck, played his hand. He showed his hand. He showed Iran in the past 4 weeks, and especially tonight, that Americans aren't going to commit ground troops. I mean, maybe Trump will try, but only 12% of Americans support sending ground troops in. Trump has no cards. He doesn't have the support of the American people, and the world will not support America or Israel. Trump figured if the Iranians closed Hormuz and 20% of the world's oil, 30 to 40% of its fertilizer got cut off, the entire world would rise up and attack Iran. Instead, they're blaming Trump. Don't poke the hornet's nest, schmucko. He's shown his hand. He's shown his hand. He has no cards to play negotiating with the Iranians. He's proven that our bombs are powerless against what Iran can do simply by shutting down Hormuz. And God forbid they get the Houthis in Yemen to close the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and then the Suez Canal is closed, and the world as we know it, which is swiftly disappearing thanks to climate catastrophe, and because of the Strait of Hormuz closing down, it's also about to plunge into darkness. They close the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and the Suez Canal is shut down. There's no military solution. It would be nice, as they say, if we had a hammer and everything else was a nail. But there isn't a military solution to this. Sorry. Now, we can our military is great for defending us, but being the world's security officer, protecting corporations, doesn't work. This is a Twilight Zone episode. There is simply no way Donald Trump can get a deal with the Iranians that is 1/10 as good as the one Obama struck with them 11 years ago. So he's stuck. He doesn't know, he lacks the vocabulary to change course. The clock is ticking on all of humanity. And Trump is a cornered rat. He doesn't know he's a cornered rat. Everyone around him does. And the Iranians know he's a cornered rat. He cannot do anything. He has zero options. Leave a comment. Tell me, forget your disdain for Trump, just for his own ego. What could he do now? Can't resume bombing because we're running out of bombs, and the Iranians have proven that they can take as much pain as he's willing to dish out. He can go after the power plants, but the Iranians will create human chains again, which will just be more war crime. I mean, I don't see him being allowed to commit war crimes at that level. I just don't see it. If we were winning, the generals and our Pentagon lawyers would be fine with kill as many civilians as you want. Not now. Not now. They're trying to save their own hide. They're worried that, how many pardons? He's going to have to use an auto pen to sign all those effing pardons. So Europe has 6 more weeks of jet fuel. Lufthansa may go out of business. The Philippines has, I think, 2 more weeks of gas left. But doesn't matter that the world hates us for what we did. They told us not to do it. Doesn't matter. We're going to keep Donald Trump in office. We're not going to invoke the 25th Amendment. And everybody's going to wring their hands inside the Situation Room trying to figure out what's best for Donald Trump. What can we do so Donald Trump can save Orange Face? What do we do so Trump doesn't feel humiliated? How much longer can we prolong human suffering so Trump's fragile ego doesn't shatter? Republicans only care about what's good for Trump. Now, Congress, or at least the Republicans in Congress, only care about what's good for Trump because they're terrified of him. But they're also terrified of the midterms. May 1st, mark it on your calendar, very important date. It's the 60-day expiration date. The war in Iran will have lasted 60 days. And according to the War Powers Act, which was passed in 1973 to prevent another Vietnam, according to the War Powers Act, a president is only allowed to make war for 60 days. Then he needs a war authorization. And no war authorization, the war's over. That's how it works. And all it takes is one chamber in Congress, either the House or the Senate. All it takes is for the House or the Senate not to vote yes on a war authorization, and that war ends. That's the power of Congress, either the Senate or the House. They refuse the war authorization. There's nothing a president can do. He has no veto power because you can't veto a bill that doesn't get passed. So right now, Democrats, including Republicans like Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Congressman Thomas Massie, also of Kentucky, they have been trying to pass, they failed so far, resolutions that demand Trump remove all U.S. forces from the theater of war in the Persian Gulf. The most recent House vote on a war powers resolution, which would have ordered Trump to remove all U.S. armed forces from hostilities with Iran, so they could stay in the Persian Gulf, but they would not be allowed to wage war on Iran. They voted on that last Thursday, April 16th, 2026. And they came very close to passing it in the House. Now, it would have to pass in the Senate, too. But it failed, razor-thin margin, 213 to 214. So it lost by one vote. One Republican voted for it, Thomas Massie of Kentucky. He introduced it. All Republicans voted against it. Only one Democrat, Congressman Jared Golden of Maine, voted against, who's the only Democrat who voted against that war. I had Jared Golden on this show. Howie Klein said one of his biggest regrets was supporting Jared Golden of Maine. Jared Golden is he's in a purple district of Maine. I think his district in Maine is the electoral vote that always goes to a Republican. He's a Democrat, and he's quitting Congress. And then there was All right, little technical problem here. All right, hang on, stay with me. You're listening to The David Feldman Show. I'm going to vamp while we reboot here. Please subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell so you know when my next show is. And if you don't hit the notification bell, we go live now every Tuesday night, Thursday night, and Sunday night at 6:05 p.m. And we have clips every night of the week, 7 nights a week at 8:30 p.m. The show may be over. Where are we? Okay. Found it. Little technical problem. One Republican, Warren Davidson of Ohio, voted present. So the point is about this war powers resolution a week ago, last Thursday. Closest, they've had about 4 or 5 resolutions since February 28th. This did better than any of them. It's getting closer and closer to being able to get a majority. And the trend lines in Congress do not bode well for Trump, because May 1st is when Congress is legally authorized to vote on this war. They have to vote on the war May 1st, and it's not looking good for Donald Trump. Now, Mike Johnson is the speaker. He's insisting this isn't a war. That's why Trump will call it an excursion, a visit. It's not a war. So he's going to try to block a vote, at least in the House, on a war authorization. The same way he tried to block a vote on releasing the Epstein files. Remember that? But you had Ro Khanna in the House, Democrat, Thomas Massie, Republican, as well as a handful of Republicans signing their discharge petition, which forced a vote on releasing the Epstein files. You remember that? And Trump lost control of the narrative. There's a reason Pam Bondi is gone. And there's a distinct possibility the same thing is about to happen on May 1st once again, at least inside the House. There'll be a discharge petition. There was a discharge petition signed this week on temporary protected legal status for Haitians. They had enough signatures on that. We've never seen this many discharge petitions before. They're bypassing the speaker. They will, I believe, force a vote on this war. And with midterms fast approaching, it's going to be a really bad look for any Republican in a purple district to have voted for this war. This is not the war you want to vote for when you're running for re-election as a senator or a congressperson. Now, Trump promised to end forever wars. To his credit, this isn't a forever war. He lost it in about a week. He didn't realize he lost it, but most Americans are realizing he lost this. And he also got elected promising to bring down inflation. Gas, well, if you're lucky, you can get it for $4 a gallon. And we're being told by his cabinet, you should settle in at that. Just expect gas to stay above $4 a gallon. When Trump returned to office, the average price for a gallon of gas was $2.37. It has more than doubled. So the trend lines are not good for the midterms, which is why Trump is trying to figure out a way to invoke the Insurrection Act. Americans can't afford Obamacare. More than 10% of Americans who were on Obamacare on December 31st of last year are now off Obamacare because on December 31st of last year, the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies expired. It's now estimated that by the time the midterms come around, as many as 40% of Americans on Obamacare will have either gone off it, meaning they have no health insurance, or will be planning to go off it at the end of this year. Not good for Republicans heading into the midterms. It's why Donald Trump wants a reason to invoke the Insurrection Act. So maybe he will send ground troops into Hormuz. Maybe that's his plan. And there'll be enough civil unrest or enough that it will look like civil unrest that he'll feel justified to invoke the Insurrection Act and cancel the elections? He wouldn't do that. He also wouldn't tell people to storm the Capitol on January 6th. So I don't know. Trump has to end this war. The American people are not the same American people who gave Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan time. A lot of people weren't sure at first. American people have wised up. They hated this war before it ever began. New polls on the war are a disaster. NBC News, CNN, The Economist, YouGov, CBS. Trump's overall job approval rating is at a second-term low and at an all-time low for Donald Trump. Both administrations. He's at COVID levels now. They're hovering around 37%. The NBC poll shows him at 37% approval rating. Nobody likes him. Other polls show him at historic lows down in Jimmy Carter territory at the height of the Iran crisis, at the height of the hostage crisis. Jimmy Carter had record low polling for any president. Trump is nibbling at those edges. He's down in George W. Bush territory at the depths of the Iraq War. Talking tough, his John Wayne swagger just doesn't cut it. Used to. 67% of Americans disapprove of how Trump has conducted this war. 67%. So that means they may or may not approve of the war, but 67% of Americans think he's blowing it. 61% say no further military action. That's a lot. This is the United States. American people love war. But it's becoming a different America. We always used to rally around our president before and during the first couple of months of a war. George W. Bush was the most popular president in American history in the lead up to his illegal invasion of Iraq. Of course, once we saw how stupid and craven he was, the numbers caved. But he did get reelected. Americans are changing. They're changing. We bailed on this war before it started, and the Iranians know this. Trump is a merchant of chaos. He likes to keep Americans confused, right? Flooding the zone with competing pieces of information. You saw it in the lead up to tonight. Vance is going to Islamabad. He's staying home. The strait is fully open for business. Oh, wait, I've decided to close it. The Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, tells America, get used to paying $4 a gallon for gasoline. Trump says, no. Gas prices are going to drop below $3 in a couple of weeks. He says, in fact, Trump said, gas prices are coming down, while people in Washington state are paying $7 a gallon. He says, the Iranians have agreed to all my demands. The war is over. We start bombing tomorrow. So that's flooding the zone with so many different pieces of information. People can't keep track. And voters just get tired of that crap. They don't listen. They just want to know, am I going to have a job in 3 months? Am I going to be able to make rent, buy food, heat my home, cool my home, buy clothes for my kids? Will I have a home? Will I have a car to sleep in? Most, up until May 1st, got to give it 60 days, most of what Trump has said about this war are abstractions to voters. They have had no real-world consequences. People are paying sort of attention to it. If you have loved ones in the service, you're following this. Or if you own stock in Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon, you're following this. Most people are, another war? Okay, that's what we do. We always go to war. Got to take my son to soccer practice. May 1st, the 60 days will be up, and Congress is going to have to authorize this war. And in 60 days, the American people are going to start feeling all the effects of the war as rising commodity prices begin to flow downstream, affecting every single part of our lives, making everything unaffordable, thereby endangering our health and exacerbating our financial precarity. Now, maybe Trump is thinking people will be so pissed off, especially if I commit ground troops, there'll be civil unrest, and I get to invoke the Insurrection Act and cancel the election. Maybe that's his plan. So chaos works. It does when you're trying to subdue the media or the opposing party. 24 news cycles an hour works when you're flooding the zone, telling so many lies that the people whose job it is to hold Trump to account don't even know where to begin. But voters don't pay attention to the 24 news cycles every hour in the age of Trump. They know what they know. And right now, Trump's chaos is morphing into whiplash. Voters are exhausted, and they have trouble turning their neck because everywhere they look, it hurts. They have whiplash. They don't like their tax dollars being used to bomb an elementary school, to destroy bridges and power plants and civilian infrastructure in Iran. They don't like it, especially when our government has no money for Obama healthcare subsidies, no money for food stamps, no money for Medicaid, no money for infrastructure. They don't like it. So somebody is going to have to make a deal with Iran. We're going to you have to invoke, if you care about this country, right or left, Democrat or Republican, somebody in the Republican Party has to say he's got to go. It's got to be removed. And you got to make a deal with Iran. Now, scores of nations around the world enrich uranium, but they don't have nuclear weapons. People have nuclear reactors. I'm not a big fan of nuclear energy, but it's not a crime for a country to have enriched uranium. Trump has to agree to allow Iran to keep its stockpile of uranium, especially since it never had a nuclear weapons program, or at least it hasn't had one since 2003. And think about it. They're going to drop a nuclear bomb on Israel. 20% of Israel is Arab. You drop a bomb on Israel, you've got Palestinians living in Gaza. They're going to get it. They're going to get it in the West Bank. Who lives in southern Lebanon, right along the northern border of Israel? Iran's Hezbollah. You drop a nuclear bomb on Israel, that radioactivity is going to spread all throughout the Middle East. You'll be killing your own. It's amazing how we can scare people into anything, to believing anything. So they don't have a nuclear weapons program. They enrich uranium up to 60, 65%. It needs, need to get it up to what, 98% to be considered weapons grade? Yeah, Iran plays fast and loose with the weapons inspectors, the same way Saddam Hussein did, because they don't want America to invade. So they like to look like they have something, they can make a dirty bomb. So Iran has about, I think, 1,000 pounds, a little under 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium, purified by up to 60%. This is the big bone of contention for Pete Hegseth and Trump and Netanyahu. Again, you need to purify it up to 98% to be considered weapons grade. Trump calls it nuclear dust, and he says, still saying this, Americans are getting it. He says Iran is either giving it to us or we're taking it. But we're not taking it, and they're not going to give it to us. There is no military solution. We cannot drop commandos into Isfahan to dig up the uranium because we have no idea where it is. So stop lying. Stop saying Iran has agreed to turn over the uranium. They haven't, and they won't, no matter how much you bomb them. In fact, the more you bomb the Iranians, the more likely they are to enrich their uranium up to weapons grade. I'm really sorry, America. I am. I know we like to sleep well at night thinking there's a military solution to everything. I'm sorry. There isn't. That's why Obama signed the deal with Iran. That's why Europe signed the deal with Iran 11 years ago. That's why the EU, Russia, the UN signed that deal, which Donald Trump said was the worst deal in the history of deal making. Like I said, right now, Donald Trump would be lucky to get 1/100th of what Obama was able to get from the Iranians 11 years ago. Obama held all the cards 11 years ago. What cards are you holding, douchebag? Donald Trump, what card do you have? What card? They're not giving up their uranium. You've been told repeatedly it's a non-starter, and it's why they wouldn't come to the bargaining table. Americans can't read a map, and they don't know the difference between nuclear enrichment and a nuclear bomb. You hear nuclear enrichment, and you get most Americans, nuclear enrichment. There's a big difference between nuclear enrichment and a nuclear bomb. Trump, thinking nuclear enrichment is a boogeyman that will scare Americans. Netanyahu kept talking about nuclear enrichment to scare the Israelis. They both painted themselves into a corner, pretending this was about Iran and a nuclear weapon. But again, this was never about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. You knew they weren't building any. You knew that. Your own director of national intelligence told you that the entire community of intelligence agencies here in the United States and overseas and the UN agreed that Iran gave up its nuclear weapons program in 2003. Yes, it enriches uranium, makes uranium purer than any other country that enriches uranium, but that's only because there's a good likelihood that Israel and the United States are going to wage war on Iran the same way they waged war on Iran's neighbor, Iraq, and they want to look a little more powerful than they are. So they don't have wasn't about nuclear bombs. This was never about toppling the regime and bringing democracy and freedom to Iran. We don't care about that. They had democracy and freedom in 1953, Mossadegh, and America got rid of him and put the Shah on the throne. We don't want democracy for the Iranians. We want an oil-rich nation making sure we get our fuel. But no, we were going to spread democracy through the Middle East once again. And Netanyahu recorded a message in Farsi. I heard they used AI, that he wasn't speaking. They translated his voice into Farsi. And he urged, once the bombing campaign started, he urged the Iranian people to rise up. Now that we've killed your leaders, rise up and take your country back. He said that even though Mossad told him, if the Iranian people rise up, they will be slaughtered. That you can keep killing the leaders of the regime, the regime still stays. Rise up. No, it wasn't about that. Trump and Hegseth wanted this war because Hegseth wanted to kill Muslims because he thinks this is the final battle. And Trump wanted to kill people of color. He likes killing people of color. He's a racist. And he's old school. He thinks, oh, all I need is a splendid little war and my poll numbers will go up and I can run for a third term. That's what he's thinking. Americans, he thought, love war. I'll be a wartime president and my numbers will go up. And I get to kill people, which I like to do, especially people of color. Netanyahu wanted to break Iran into 1,000 little pieces so Iran wouldn't have the money, resources, and time to support the real existential threat to Israel in Benjamin Netanyahu's mind, and that would be Hezbollah in Lebanon. And because Americans can't read a map, can't be bothered to discover where the Litani River is, They keep it simple for you. It's all about, we're doing this because Iran is about to have a nuclear weapon. It's about Hezbollah. And I don't know how you get the Iranians to open up Hormuz, because I don't know how you get Benjamin Netanyahu to pull out of southern Lebanon. I mean, he's a cornered rat. He really is. I should wrap it up. Yeah. Let me just finish up here. Anybody still here? All right. All right. This is what you do. You get rid of Trump. You say, oops, my bad. And you unfreeze Iran's assets. It's their money. You want Hormuz open, you have to do what Obama did 11 years ago and agree to unfreeze some of Iran's assets so the people who live in Iran don't go hungry. And you unfreeze their assets to help Iran rebuild after America's needless bombs destroyed so much of their country. I think they deserve their assets unfrozen, considering what we did in the past 5 years. So there are reports that Jared Kushner, who should be in prison, during the last negotiations, he reportedly offered, how about we unfreeze your assets in exchange for giving up your uranium? That way, no doubt, some of those unfrozen assets find their way into Kushner's brokerage account. That's usually how Kushner negotiates. But that ship, they said no. Iran said no. We've got Hormuz. Unfreeze our assets. We're not giving up our uranium. Steve Witkoff says to Iran, last time we negotiated, we are willing to offer you, the Iranians, a 20-year moratorium on nuclear enrichment. America, Witkoff and Jared said, if you stop enriching uranium for 20 years, we have the beginning of a deal. You stop enriching uranium for 20 years, open up Hormuz, and we have a deal. That happened during the last peace talks, nearly 2 weeks ago. Now, Iran reportedly, and I don't know if this is completely true, but at one point during the negotiations, Iran said it would suspend its nuclear enrichment program for 5 years. But Vance, Kushner, and Witkoff said no. Why? Because Trump was attending a UFC fight in Miami, and they would call him, and he'd scream nothing short of surrender. I want total and complete victory. And I don't want J.D. Vance getting credit for anything, because it's always about Donald Trump. During the negotiations, Iran said they wanted the United States to agree to stay out of Hormuz and give Iran complete and total control of their own maritime sea lanes. Trump said no. Then he said, wait a second, you're charging a toll to pass through the strait. That's a great idea. How about I split it with you? I'm not making that up. He said, you know what? We'll both enforce the toll along the Strait of Hormuz. That would be a violation of international law. And Iran said, no, we're going to do this, and we're splitting it with Oman since they control the other lane inside the Strait of Hormuz. So Israel and the United States did do something smart. They didn't kill Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, who is a moderate. He was, his compound was bombed on the opening day, February 28th, March 1st. He survived. He's alive. He was elected president 2 years ago. And this week he said, we want peace. We want the war to end so we can focus on national reconstruction. So there are moderates. You can make a deal. America, we don't have any cards. We don't have any power, at least militarily, because we elected the dumbest, most corrupt con artist in the history of Western civilization, Donald Trump. We owe the world an apology, and the longer he stays in office, the longer that apology is going to have to be. And we're going to have to pay the Iranians, you know, that $200 billion war supplemental that Trump wants. Give it to Iran. Here's $200 billion. We're sorry. Open up Hormuz. And they'll say, tell Netanyahu to pull out of southern Lebanon. I don't know what the answer is. I know you don't get yourself involved in the Middle East. I know that. Trump is stupid, just like George W. Bush. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to my channel. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. Live shows every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. We run clips 7 nights a week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. There's a clip coming up soon. That's the schedule. I'm sticking with it. It's not easy, especially when we had late breaking news like this, but moving on. Thank you.